This week's Lasso Works Cedar Coach of the Week is the one and only Vernon Riley of the 2nd and 3rd grade girls Cougar team. Vernon, if this week we had our coaches dress their best week, and Vernon showed up in a suit that you have to see it to believe it. It was amazing. I call him Showtime. It matched his team, purple all the way.
Yeah.
Vernon's such a great guy. He helps in our league with reffing and does all kinds of things. He's a great coach, has a great family. Vernon, for all your efforts, you are our Coach of the Week.
Yep. And this week's LC Sports and Recreation Player of the Week goes to the 3rd grade Huskies, Mr. Beckham Dwyer. This is what Coach Madison said about Beckham. She said he was tasked with guarding and going up against someone so much taller than him, and he took it in stride and played his heart out. He also lived out the word of the week, which was respect. And during the game, he and a member of the opposing team ran into each other pretty hard by accident. They both hit the ground, but Beckham got up, helped the other young man up, and made sure he was okay. Beckham, great job working hard today. You guys had a tough game last week, but you worked hard. You guarded someone significantly taller than you, and you kept working. So, Beckham, good job. You are this week's LC Sports and Rec Player of the Week. All right, welcome to episode 30, which is 10 years younger than I am. Hey, I'm Katrina.
And I'm Todd.
Yep. If you don't know us by now, shame on you. Go back and listen to some episodes. But yeah, if you're new with us, this podcast is all about really just pressing into the faith component of our lives and just empowering coaches and parents to do a good job on discipling kids while they play youth sports. So we had our last game on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
We only got half of the games played because of the wintry weather.
Weather got in the way.
Yes, yeah. But that meant that you were at the LC.
Such a fun day for me. I'm always like, I not that I don't enjoy 4th grade basketball. I love 4th grade basketball, but I never get to see the kindergarten, 1st, 2nd graders. You have not lived until you've watched kindergarten basketball.
Yeah, agreed.
It's just so much fun for me. I literally had popcorn and watched the game during the kindergarten game. Yeah.
Yeah, it was super fun. I'm glad that you got to see what goes on at the LC. So, and you got to have fun too.
So much fun.
Yep.
So much fun.
So today the coaches in our league, we're moving from respect and we're going to the topic of impact. So, throughout the course of the season, the coaches are using grit, gratitude, respect, impact, and toughness. And they're talking about basketball and faith and how those two go hand in hand. And so today we're going to pick up with impact, which is what the coaches are talking about this week.
Yeah.
Specifically, we'll talk about how embracing adversity has a positive impact for growth.
Yeah, I wish we didn't have to go through adversity.
No doubt.
But we do.
I was reminded, we were behind the scores table on Saturday, and I had recently it was I think it was the end of the quarter or end of 4-minute, and it was time for subs, and I saw kids going to the beach, and then the bench.
That would be awesome if they were going to the beach.
I would like to go to the beach. Actually, maybe the beach is on my mind. So I saw Dad come over and greet his, his player. And what did I ask you? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
I said, "What do you feel about?"
Oh yeah. How do you feel about Dad's coming over and doing that, or parents coming over and doing that? Yeah. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
No, leave the kids alone. Because I want the kids to figure it out, but at the same time, I'm a parent.
Exactly.
And I get it too. I get it.
Confession, I've went over to Taya and probably given her a hug and told her good job.
Confession, this Saturday, I also went to Taya and told her to score more and stop passing the ball.
Oh, my goodness.
Guilty.
So adversity. Adversity, obviously, if you look up adversity in the dictionary, it's not something pleasant,
right?
Obviously.
Right.
It's misfortune. It's a situation that's very difficult. You can call it unfavorable. But I think that we both agree, like if we're going to grow in our faith and emotionally and mentally, adversity is necessary.
Yeah. I can't recall any stories in the Bible off the top of people that started out with a great life, went through nothing, and ended up great.
Yeah.
I really can't recall any of those stories. Yeah. So, I mean, it's stuff that we go through on a daily basis. And, for me, we talked about that. Well, we didn't talk about it. Our own pastor talked about it this past Sunday, just in the art of surrender, even through difficult trials and things that you go through. And so I think a lot of what you have planned to talk about today, the answer for a lot of it is how we surrender in those moments to the one who's in control.
Is there a difference in surrendering and embracing?
Yeah, I think there is, because I can embrace the moment. I can embrace just what is happening to me and still try to take control over that situation. Like I can understand that it's going to be hard and I've got to figure out a way to get through it, but that still implies some self-reliance as opposed to, you know what, this is happening to me. I can't control it. I'm just going to let it go and I'm going to give it over to Christ and see, where this is going to take me. That doesn't mean I can't learn from it. I can have all five senses firing, during whatever trial this is and learn from that situation. But I'm not trying to control the outcome of it. I'm just trying to figure out what it is that God's trying to teach me through this.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think that's the difference.
I didn't have that question planned.
I didn't have the answer planned either.
As you were thinking through it, the thought that I had was embracing is part of the surrender. We're told to lay everything at the feet of Jesus. Yeah. Cast all your cares on me because, I care for you. That's what Jesus says. And then as a result of that, okay, let's embrace what we're currently going through and let's just see where God takes us.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that really kind of a good segue into the story that I was telling you guys this morning, about the game last night where, I coach a 5th and 6th grade basketball team and pretty good group of kids. They're very talented. And last night they came out of the gate very slow. And we were down, I don't know, 8-6, 8-10, whatever it was in the first quarter. And they began to bicker with themselves and point fingers at themselves. And I stood stoically on the sideline and let it happen, where my inclination was to call timeout, fix it. But I knew that if I jump in and fix things the way that we're tactically approaching the game, that was not going to change attitudes. And so I let it go all the way to the point where the other coach actually called a timeout. And when they came over to the bench, they looked at me and I said, have a seat. And I let them sit. And I let them sit in it wondering what is happening. Like we're getting beat. Coach isn't talking to us. And then from then, as they were getting ready to go back on the court, I said, okay, are we done? Are we done playing around and blaming each other? And so it was kind of a reset moment. But for me, as a coach, it was an opportunity to let them see they got to figure it out on their own. But more importantly, I knew that we ultimately beat that team by 20 points last night. And I knew what the outcome was going to be because I saw what was happening. I knew there were a couple things that I as a coach could fix that would make instant changes. And sometimes I think that's what we go through is God lets us sometimes just figure it out. Hey, are you going to rely on me or not? Are you going to stand around and point at each other and blame each other in your marriage and your friendships and all that kind of stuff? Are you going to try to fight through your circumstances, or are you just going to surrender and trust that I know the plan? And for me last night, that was kind of a microcosm. Wasn't trying to play God. That's not what I'm saying. But it was an opportunity for me to let them kind of learn their own lesson about reliance. At the end or at halftime, we talked about, are you going to trust me as your coach that we can go down by 10 points and still come back and win? because I can help you do that? Or are you going to continue to try to press and press and press and just get aggravated with each other?
Yeah.
So I thought that last night, thinking through that, I was like, man, this is adversity.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, embrace it and then surrender to the fact that you can't control it, So,
I like that because, Todd, like you are practicing what you preach and what we'll get to. And that's, kids can figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like they can.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that sometimes like we need help guiding them there.
Right.
As you did in your final seconds before they went back onto the court.
Mm-hmm.
Like you guided them to it.
Right.
But kids are smart enough.
Yeah.
And I think that, if given the opportunity and enough time and relationship is built with kids, like as far as the coach-player relationship, if respect is given, they're going to do all that they can to live up to your expectations.
Absolutely.
But you have to set the expectation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then you have to let them rise to it accordingly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I, just from being I hesitate to say the word manager, but a leader, in a career where, things get to the point where they're often life and death, and it's difficult sometimes to let go of the reins, and trust that there's a plan and trust in the process. But one of the things that we did in law enforcement was train, like, some days I think I was paid just to train 24/7. And the reason you do that is because when the wheels come off, that's what you resort back to, right? Or resort back to. And it's no different here. You have to get those kids to understand that there is a process. Yeah. There is a way that things go. There's an order of things. And that's biblical, right? Yeah. The Bible is all about order. And you have to trust in the one that has the control, that has the plan. And it's so hard. It's so hard for people in general, not just kids. Mm-hmm. Kids are smart. Adults are smart. Maybe too smart for our own good sometimes because we try to push through things instead of embracing it and trusting who's in control.
Yeah. So if adversity has its biggest impact in our lives, what's an adverse situation that you've been a part of that has changed you for the positive? Like if we're saying that adversity has a greater impact than success, what adverse situation have you been through that has changed you? Or maybe not like but give me an example.
Yeah. So I don't know that I'd give a full example as so much as there were multiple times where I was in situations that were they got pretty hairy in law enforcement, and there were times when things just got a little over my head, and again, you have to go back and you have to trust your training, and you have to trust that things are going to work out the way they are. And I'll use the word scared. I was scared, but that's not the emotion that comes out in the moment, because you again, you go back to your training, but there were very adverse situations where you continue to move forward, you continue to trust the process, and I'm thinking of two or three in my head right now that I won't give details to, but what came out of that, what I learned from that, is that you cannot bog yourself down and trying to. You have to be able to think on your feet, but you can't control the situation. You can only control what it is that you've been trained to do, and you have to be able to trust others in that moment. And so it taught me a lot about life in general, about having to rely on other people, having to be able to surrender in the moment to your training, to be able to trust that all the things that you've been taught to that point are things that will help you get through that situation. And I equate that to this morning I got up and I read my Bible like I do every day, and and I trust the things that I'm reading. I trust the lessons that I'm learning from what I read in that scripture, so that when those trials and things come my way, I can fall back on that. Yeah. And that is my training. Right. for life. And so without that, how do I navigate those adverse situations? Because then it is self-reliance. I'll tell you one example that is a little more lighthearted is the first time that I went through simunitions training. I don't know if I've told you this story or not.
And what is simunitions
So
training?
simunitions training is it's a live fire type training, except that it's with rubber bullets, right? And when you get shot with one, it hurts.
Okay.
Like it'll draw blood.
Yeah.
At the right angle. But you don't want to get shot with them. And so the first time that I did simunitions training, gosh, this was over 20 years ago. We were on the campus of Texas Women's University, and we were practicing or training on some dynamic entry stuff into buildings or homes. And so you wear protective clothing, you wear a mask. And so the objective was to go into the home and secure the home. And when we made entry into the house, we were met with live fire back or simunitions fire back. And so because I had never been through that before, it is immediately jarring because you go to the range and you shoot at paper, right? But you don't practice being shot back at, which nowadays, I mean, that's what you do a lot. But it obscured my vision. It immediately sent me into tunnel vision and auditory exclusion and all the things. And I'm returning fire. And when the dust settles, I realized I was shooting at my own guy. Oh, no. And he was shooting at me because we had gotten separated and our training fell apart.
Yeah.
And we were trying to go to what we thought was best rather than relying on what we had been trained to do. Yeah. And so we call that inoculation because it's the first time that you've been put through something where you face that kind of adversity, and then you have to learn from it. So what we learned from it is, hey, maybe instead of getting overwhelmed in the moment, you trust what it is the training says to do, and it'll take care of itself. And so after you go through it, a few times, and then a dozen times, and then 100 times, once you've done it enough, you begin to understand, oh, this is why we train all the things that we do, because when the bullets start flying back at us, this stuff actually works. Yeah. So you learn from that.
And that literally is life and death. It could be not the training.
Not the training, but the training obviously is to prepare for the real thing. And being in the real thing, if you don't rely on your training, then things tend to fall apart pretty quickly. Yeah. That's
huge, man. Yeah, I would say mine. My biggest, I guess, adverse situation is when we went through the adoption process and we got matched with a baby from another state, and he was born. We went up there, and like hours before it was time to go pick up this baby, the birth mom canceled.
Oh my gosh!
So it was a failed adoption, and man, that was probably the hardest thing we have ever been through. Yeah. In our 10 years, and I would say in my entire life probably.
Yeah.
Because I remember just being stunned and yet sad at the same time, and we sat in that for a week.
Yeah.
I've never experienced grief like that.
So what during that week, what did you do to get through
I'm not even kidding. I sat on the couch.
Yeah.
And just cried and cried and cried.
Right.
I think Dean went back to work. But yeah, I was shocked at my response for sure.
Because you expected to respond differently?
I sure didn't expect it to go wrong.
Right.
Right. But to feel that level of heartache, I've never experienced that.
Right.
We were on the verge, we had a name picked out for this kid, everything.
Yeah.
And so, that was super tough. But now, looking back on it, if we had gotten that little boy, would we have Taya?
Right.
Would we be happy with that little boy? Absolutely, without a doubt, right?
Yeah.
But we would have missed out on the goodness and silliness and craziness of our now 5.5-year-old. So and it just gives us the ability to be able to relate to people more, when they go through that process, I'm sure the brothers beside you in the training, you guys were going through that together. And then on the other end of that, I'm sure that you led trainings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You knew what the guys were going through.
Sure. And watching them, I mean, it's no different than the basketball story I told from last night. It's a different perspective watching people go through adversity. As a parent, you do that, that is so incredibly difficult. I would rather go through the adversity myself, no matter how hard it is, than to watch my kids go through it.
Yeah.
And whether it be training and watching young officers go through this stuff, or kids or basketball players, whatever it is, you want to grab them and hug them and tell them it's going to be okay. Yeah. But there's times when they've got to go through it too. They've got to learn what it means to go through adversity and how to fall back on the things that matter the most. And so my question to you in your situation is, you said it lasted about a week. What got you out of it?
That's a great question. I honestly don't remember.
Yeah.
I think I just had to go through the grief.
Yeah.
And let it just run up and down my body.
So then when we fast forward and Taya is introduced into your life, did you reflect back on that time at all?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like that failed adoption happened in September, and we took off about a month and a half from going back to our fundraisers for adoption, and then we jumped back in November, and we did we dressed up those yard flamingos as like turkeys, and flocked yards with flamingos. It was really fun.
Yeah.
And within a month, the month of November, we raised $20,000.
Incredible.
And that, to me, that was just God's provision of saying, hey, listen, I see you. I know what you went through, but keep going.
Right.
Like, keep going.
Right.
And then even, in June when we got the call that, hey, a birth mom this is Taya's story.
Yeah.
A birth mom has picked you. She's born. This is a Tuesday. She wants to meet you on Friday at Crackle Barrel. If it goes well, you can take the baby home. And the entire time, I'm like, okay, we'll see.
Right. You have that negative vibe going.
So much so that on Thursday night, our caseworker calls us and is like, hey, listen, I get it. I get it. You've been hurt, you've been burned, but listen, tomorrow, because she could read me. Like, I wasn't excited. I wasn't showing anything. And she said, I completely understand where you're coming from, but tomorrow when you meet that birth mother, you've got to fake it. Like, you've got to fake it because she doesn't care about your last experience.
Right.
Like, she cares about placing her baby with you.
Yeah.
And so very vividly, I remember that conversation and being like, okay, like, I've got to press into this a little bit more.
There's such a lesson there because I know who I am. And I know that I don't know if I would call it hurt or burned or whatever it is, having so many negative experiences in my life, that sometimes I catch myself just expecting the worst. I just expect the worst. And I kind of have, over the years adopted that philosophy of, if I expect the worst and it's not as bad as I expect, then it'll be a good thing. Right. Yeah. And I have to catch myself and tell myself, you can't do that. Like, that's been
a whole career though. Of not trusting people.
Right.
Right.
Life,
so like,
a life of that. Yeah. True. But if I believe in what it is that I say I believe in,
exactly,
then that's not the kind of thing. If
you believe that hope is real,
yes,
right,
yes,
and Jesus is our source of hope,
right. But you were so heartbroken that it's tough. It's tough to ignore what it is that you've been through, the adversity that you've been through, and move past that.
Yeah,
and we can sit here all day long and talk about a 5th and 6th grade boys basketball team and them going through adversity for like 5 minutes.
Right.
But think about all of the children that go through adversity in their home life every day. They get up in the morning, maybe a parent gets them dressed for school, maybe not. They might eat breakfast, they might not. Yeah. They watch, just the problems in the marriage of their parents, if there are two parents. It's just, there's adversity that is just crushing.
Yeah.
And how do you get kids beyond that? There's got to be a hope.
Adversity that's normal for kids.
Yeah.
Which is tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. James 1, 2 through 4 says, consider it pure joy, which, let me just stop right there. Come on, James. Consider it pure joy, my brothers.
James didn't get shot with ammunition.
He said, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds.
Yeah.
For you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance.
Right.
And perseverance must finish its work so that we may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing." There's a lot to be said about that verse, but I think that, as far as embracing adversity, that moves us towards maturity. And I think that it's true, like in what James says, consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many kinds. I mean, that's essentially saying embrace it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just embrace it. It's coming.
The the military talks about embrace the suck.
Oh, well, yeah.
I mean, that's just a thing.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I think about that in terms of my marriage. Not embrace the suck. No,
Okay.
no, not at all.
Okay, good.
But
wanted to clear that up,
there
maybe.
have been moments, where it has self-inflicted. We just hadn't figured out how to deal with each other and our differences and things like that. And early in our marriage, if there were financial issues or whatever, it would just there were times when it would just tear us apart.
Yeah.
And today, I fast forward. Do we have a perfect marriage? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. But I have a phenomenal wife. And if we have, whether it be children issues or financial issues, I know at the end of the day, I'm going to embrace the fact that, yes, today sucked. Mm-hmm. Today was not a good day because of X, Y, or Z. But you know what? I got you. And you got me, and I have to sell her on that last part. But at the end of the day, I now know her love languages, how to deal with her when she does feel overwhelmed with adversity, or if we're both going through it at the time. I know the things that I can do to go to her and remind her that, there is someone in control that's not us, but we count our blessings.
Yeah.
And we've learned from the lessons early in our marriage what not to do.
Yeah, and I think that that's key. Like what you said, you've learned what not to do. Mm-hmm. Also, how do you perceive the bad day? Like it can be a bad day, but there were good things that happened, right?
That's a good point.
You can't just. Yeah. What is that saying? Get rid of the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah, I mean, there's good in every single day.
Right. Yeah.
Last week when it was super cold, I hate the cold. Can't stand it. Cannot stand it. Dean wants to go live somewhere cold in Vermont or something.
Right.
But I was telling him the other day at dinner, I was reflecting on the wintry weather that pretty much let my hopes down.
You don't like cold, but you were really rooting for
excited.
like
5 to 10 inches of snow is what I was rooting for, right? So, but no, I leave the LC last Monday night. And it's cold. I had just finished practice. It's like 9:15 or so. And there's something about the stillness of winter that just kind of takes your breath away.
Yeah.
So I walked to my truck and, it was overwhelming. So all that to say, even in the midst of like bone shivering cold, I still experienced God's presence in the cold. It was so still. It was so peaceful. Yeah. And you have to press into what you're currently going through to see God. God is all around us, even in the adversity. A win for us, as far as Taya, and she's playing basketball, is there hasn't been any meltdowns yet.
Right.
And hopefully there won't be. But she's done a tremendous job in just embracing the challenge of learning something new.
Sure.
Which as adults, I don't know that we do well.
Yeah.
Right? Those kids, that's their lives, right?
It reminds me, what you're talking about reminds me of, it's like you go through a day when your kids are younger and they're just all over the place and you're like, this child is not going to make it. I'm going to strangle this child before she turns 5, right? Yeah. And you go through that, but then you're at the grocery store somewhere and someone tells you your child is so well behaved, and you're like, really?
Yep. Yeah.
So you have to learn to not dwell on those kinds of things.
Yep. Yeah. So if we transition into how do we prepare our kids for adversity, or how do we either let them go through it or guide them through it, what would be What would be your comments on that?
I think that the preparation for adversity is long before the adversity ever strikes.
I like that, the preparation.
Yeah.
So what does the preparation look like?
Well, for me, let's set the kids aside for a second, and I talk about how I try to spend time in my Bible every day. I try to spend time in prayer every day. I try to proactively make sure my family knows that I love them.
Yeah.
I try to pour into them as much as possible, because when that adversity hits, they need to know that I'm a safe place.
Yeah.
When adversity hits for me, I need to know that I can go to the one true God and find my safe place. And so that preparation for adversity is intentional time. It is making sure that you know what's important, and that when it all falls apart, because I'm reading a book right now, and it's about basically biblical manhood, and it talks about how man is designed so that we're supposed to look out to see what's on the horizon. We're not built to just see right in front of our face. And so if we look out and we know that those difficulties are going to come because we see them on the horizon, how are you preparing for them? Yeah. Because if you're not preparing for them, they're coming anyway. So we have to lean on the one true God to see this is my plan for you, that if you surrender to me, I'm in control and I'll take care of you. So the preparation is both spiritual and mental and sometimes even physical for what it is that we know that we're going to go through. And if we teach our kids that, yes, I can't go, even if I see that issue coming on the horizon, I can't stop it.
Yeah.
I can't stop it from getting here. Am I going to go through it? I'm going through it. I heard one time that you're either going through a trial, coming out of a trial, or getting ready to go into one, right? And so they're going to come. The Bible never promises that we won't go through them. Yeah. But how are you preparing yourself to go through that, to cling to the one who really matters, that's in control?
Yeah. I think that's key. You bring up a good point. If we believe and understand that our kids are going through a trial, have gone through a trial, or is about to go through a trial, that is a great perspective in how we perceive them handling it.
Yeah.
And us guiding them.
I used to get worried
instead of rescuing a kid from what they're about to go through.
Yes, 100%. You can't do that because you can't protect them. You can't be around them every day.
Yeah.
When we drop them off at school in the morning, you're not there. And if they don't learn to fend for themselves, we call them helicopter parents, right? And we see it all the time. And we're guilty of it all the time
exactly.
too. But I think at some point you have to realize those kids are going to be us someday. And where would we be if we didn't have the stories that we have that have taught us so much? There's just you can't make this life pristine for your children to go through.
Yeah. And then ultimately, this is true too, just guiding them back to Jesus.
Yes.
Guiding them to the one that knows their struggle, that knows how they're going to walk through it, and letting them know, hey, Jesus is always with you. Right. I will help you. I'll help you, guide through and process, what's going on. But ultimately, Jesus is the one that we need to talk to.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll ask you a question, unscripted, and that is, when you're going through it, how can someone support you when you're going through something like that?
I would say simply listening.
Yeah.
Just listening.
Yeah.
Listening, and then praying, and then asking me how it's going.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
I don't know that I need any advice.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah.
I go to a few people for advice, but
right.
But yeah, just listening in and of itself and asking questions is paramount. Because I'll tell you this, as a pastor, there's not too many people that ask questions. You're usually the one asking the questions.
Yeah. True.
And that's, that's truth. That is what it is. But at the same time, it's not poor, pitiful me. I have my people that I go to.
Right.
But yeah, plainly listen, pray, and ask me how it's going.
Yeah.
I don't really need advice.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're going through something that difficult, you're trying to process it and you're trying to figure out where you're going. And it doesn't, for me, I'm like you, it doesn't ever help for someone to come in and say, have you thought about doing this? Yes, I've thought about that.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm living in this moment.
Yeah.
You're just coming across me. But
And when that happens, you're not listening to me. You're looking for an answer from me, and I don't want an answer.
Exactly.
I just want you to listen.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it's tough, and the best thing that was ever told to me when I was going through adversity, the best thing that was ever told to me was by a mentor of mine, and he said, "Listen, I am as close or as far as you need me. You make the call." Mm-hmm. And for me, and that's all he said. Mm-hmm. He didn't try to walk me through anything or tell me what to do or correct anything. He just said that. And for me, I knew that was kind of my get out of jail free card. Mm-hmm. Like when I was just down, I knew I could call that person and say, "Hey, this is how I'm feeling today." And all he would do is listen.
Yeah.
Never offer any kind of advice unless I asked for it. Did he have advice? Absolutely he did.
Yeah.
But he didn't offer it until I was ready to accept it.
Yep.
Yeah. So going through adversity and having people in your corner that can do that, man, that's so big. Yeah. That's so big.
Yeah. And if it hasn't translated yet, please be in the corner for your kid, but not in way of a helicopter parent.
Yeah.
Be there to listen. What the Bible says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow in action.
Yeah.
And let God help you know the right questions to ask and know how to respond, rather than like if your kid has experienced, let's say, bullying or something bad, instead of wanting to go up to the school and bust some heads open, help them get through it. Like help them know, like how can you get out of the situation? What can you do to advocate for yourself? Do those things first rather than going to the school and busting somebody's head.
Yeah. And again, it's the preparation piece of what is your relationship like with that person beforehand?
Yeah. Can they come to you?
Yeah. Because
do they know you'll listen?
Yeah. Right.
I'm speaking to me right now.
Me too.
Does Taya know?
Me too. Yeah.
Does Taya know that I will listen to her? I mean, I had, this morning we were 10 minutes from walking out of the door and there was still like 2 more things that had to be done.
Yeah.
And so we're in a little bit of a rush. And I'm like, "Hey, Taya, let's go. Let's finish what we're doing. And then she was like, "Mom, I want a hug." And in my head, I rolled my eyes.
Yes.
Because I knew that I had to slow down because I knew that she needed a hug. And that meant that I had to slow down. And I was like, "Okay, come here."
Right. Yeah. But that's so true and so typical. And and man, let me tell you, like, if you're going through adversity, okay, I'm just going to say this. I'm not a meal train guy, right? I'm not a meal train guy.
Cook for me?
Well, if you ask me to, I will. But you know what bothers me is we'll go into, whether it be a Sunday school class or a church gathering or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, Bobby Sue is going through it. Who wants to start a meal train?" Right? And it's like, okay.
Not your spiritual gift?
No, it's not my spiritual gift. Like there's something very practical about that. But the inside of me is screaming, has anybody bothered to get to know Bobby Sue before? Why am I using the name Bobby Sue? I don't know.
I don't know.
But has anybody bothered to get through or to get to know her before this happened? And maybe the answer is yes. I don't know. But all too often I see people that, it's awkward. You go deliver food and you don't really know them. It's the first time you've ever been to their house. And like you're trying to show love, but you don't know how to show love. And that person that's going through it, if it's me, is like, just leave. Like I don't drop the spaghetti at the door. And, there's just something to that. And so I think that it's awkward for us to try to support people going through adversity sometimes because we don't know the things to say. We don't know the things to do. If you come to me today and say, "I got diagnosed with cancer," wow, that's a bomb dropped on my life just as much. Well, not as much, but it's a huge thing for me too, to try to figure out how to relate to you. And so we don't always know what to say or what to do to people that are going through adversity. And I think this is the other side of that adversity thing is we have loved ones that we want to know how to support through this stuff. And the fact of the matter is you can't protect them from going through this stuff, whether it's children or friends or whatever. Yes, you can do things like meal trains or send them cards or tell them that you love them or give them a hug. That's great. All great things. But the bottom line is, have you prepared for that moment by loving on them prior to that?
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I think that's where we'll stop.
I think that's all I got.
That's all you got. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, adversity definitely impacts us for sure.
Absolutely.
And we have the ability to have, you know, a very negative perspective, or we can just take it, surrender it, and then embrace it and see how it goes. Doesn't make it any better or smoother. Like, it's not gonna, like, you know, put balm on it, you know, and hurt any less. But if we know that adversity leads to, you know, maturity in who we are, then what James said in chapter 1 is absolutely true.
Yeah.
And
sure.
And I'm sure all of us can relate to helping our kids navigate through that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for watching. We're done with episode 30 with Winning with the Home Team, and we'll see you later.
Have a great day.
Man, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed hearing us ramble about youth sports or other strangely interesting sports topics related to families, please go and like and subscribe to the show so that you can get regular updates when a new podcast is released. We'd also love to connect with you. Head on over to our socials. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We're under LC Sports and Recreation.
And if you're new to our podcast, go check out some of our previous episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. There's some good stuff on there. And pay attention because these come out pretty quickly, weekly, as a matter of fact. And you're going to learn a lot about what we have to say with regards to our league and how to win with the home team.